The Eastern Front of World War II, a theater of unparalleled brutality and scale, reached a critical juncture in the summer of 1942. After the initial, devastating successes of Operation Barbarossa in 1941, the German Wehrmacht had been stalled at the gates of Moscow by the unforgiving Russian winter and fierce Soviet resistance. As the spring thaws gave way to the scorching summer, Adolf Hitler redirected his strategic focus. Instead of renewing the drive on Moscow, his gaze turned south, towards the vast oil fields of the Caucasus. Crucial for the Third Reich's war machine, a key objective in this new offensive, codenamed Operation Fall Blau, Case Blue, became the city of Stalingrad. Stalingrad, formerly Tsaritsyn, bore the name of the Soviet dictator, Joseph Stalin, imbuing it with immense symbolic and propaganda value for both sides. Beyond its name, its strategic importance was undeniable. A vital industrial center producing tanks and artillery, and a critical transportation hub controlling shipping along the Volga River, connecting European Russia with the Caspian Sea. Its capture would sever Soviet supply lines and open the path to the Caucasus oil. On the German side, the advance on Stalingrad was spearheaded by the Sixth Army, under the command of General der Panzertruppe Friedrich Paulus, methodical staff officer known for his detailed planning. Supporting the ground forces was the formidable Luftwaffe's 4th Air Fleet, led by Generaloberst Wolfram von Richthofen, tasked with providing air superiority and devastating close air support. Hitler's strategy was a classic blitzkrieg approach, rapid armored thrusts to encircle and destroy Soviet forces, followed by the swift capture of the city. He envisioned a decisive victory that would break Soviet morale and secure Germany's eastern flank. However, his unyielding refusal to allow tactical retreats would prove catastrophic. Facing this onslaught, the Soviet defense of Stalingrad fell primarily to the 62nd Army, under the tenacious command of Lieutenant General Vasily Chuikov. Chuikov adopted a grim, desperate strategy: hold every building, fight for every meter, and engage the Germans in close-quarters combat to negate their superior air power and tank advantage. His order was, not one step back, above Chuikov. The Stavka, Soviet High Command, was increasingly influenced by dynamic strategists like General Georgy Zhukov and General Alexander Vasilevsky. They understood that while Stalingrad must be held at all costs, the ultimate victory would come from a well-orchestrated counter-offensive, not merely static defense. Their strategy evolved to bleed the Germans dry within the city, while secretly amassing forces for a massive encirclement operation. The German assault on Stalingrad began in earnest in mid-August 1942. On August 23rd, the Luftwaffe launched a massive bombing raid, transforming the city into a fiery inferno and reducing much of it to rubble. Waves of Heinkel. P-111 bombers dropped thousands of tons of explosives, killing tens of thousands of civilians and soldiers in a single day, setting the stage for a new kind of warfare amidst the ruins. Despite the apocalyptic destruction, the Soviet 62nd Army, reinforced by citizen militias and hastily trained recruits, clung to the city with astonishing resolve. German Panzer IV Ausf tanks and infantry, initially expecting a swift capture, found themselves embroiled in a nightmarish struggle amidst the wreckage, a labyrinth of debris, twisted metal, and shattered buildings. This urban combat became known as Rattenkrieg, or Rat War, a brutal claustrophobic struggle for every street, every house, every floor, and every room. German and Soviet soldiers often fought within meters of each other, making traditional artillery and air support difficult to employ without risking friendly fire. Snipers, such as the legendary Vasily Zaitsev, became vital assets, eliminating high-value targets. Iconic battles unfolded around specific structures, which became symbols of resistance. Pavlov's house, a heavily damaged 4-story apartment building, was defended by a small group of Soviet soldiers for 58 days, repelling relentless German assaults. The Mamayev Kurgan, a commanding hill overlooking the city, changed hands numerous times in savage, desperate fighting, its slopes eventually saturated with blood and shrapnel. The fighting was particularly intense in the city's industrial district, where the Red October Steel Factory, the Barricadi Artillery Factory, and the Dzerzhinsky Tractor Factory became veritable fortresses. Workers often fought alongside soldiers, defending their workplaces in a grim testament to total war. The Germans sought to capture these factories, not just for their output, but to sever the last Soviet toeholds on the Volga. As autumn turned to winter, the fighting continued unabated. German supply lines were stretched to breaking point, and the constant close-quarters combat exhausted their elite infantry. Soviet defenders, though also suffering immense casualties and shortages, had the advantage of fighting on their home ground, often utilizing the city's sewers and basements for movement and ambush. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the Germans, a colossal Soviet counteroffensive was meticulously being planned. Generals Zhukov and Vasilevsky, leveraging the Germans' overstretched flanks, which were largely protected by less mobile and poorly equipped Romanian 3rd and 4th Armies, conceived Operation Uranus. Launched on November 19, 1942, Operation Uranus involved a massive pincer movement. The Southwestern Front and the Don Front struck the Romanian 3rd Army north of Stalingrad, while the Stalingrad Front attacked the Romanian 4th Army to the south. The speed and scale of the Soviet offensive, spearheaded by T-34 medium tanks and KV-1 heavy tanks, shattered the Axis flanks. Within 4 days, on November 23rd, Soviet forces linked up near the town of Kalach-on-Don, effectively encircling the entire German 6th Army, along with elements of the 4th Panzer Army. Comprising an estimated 250,000 to 300,000 Axis troops within a vast pocket, or Kessel, Hitler, convinced he could resupply the trapped army by air, vehemently refused Paulus permission to attempt a breakout. He ordered the Luftwaffe to establish an air bridge, but the beleaguered 4th Air Fleet, operating from airfields often far from the Kessel, was unable to deliver anything close to the required daily tonnage of supplies. The German Junkers, Ju-52 transport aircraft struggled against Soviet air superiority and harsh winter conditions. General Feldmarschall Erich von Manstein, commanding Army Group Dawn, attempted a relief effort, Operation Wintergewitter Winter Storm, in mid-December, driving towards Stalingrad from the southwest with elements of the 4th Panzer Army. However, stiff Soviet resistance, particularly from the 2nd Guards Army, and the brutal winter weather ultimately halted Manstein's advance just short of the pocket, at the Mishkova River. Inside the Kessel, conditions rapidly deteriorated. Food and ammunition ran critically low. Soldiers endured extreme cold, widespread disease, and constant Soviet shelling. Morale plummeted, and thousands succumbed to frostbite and starvation. The promise of an aerial lifeline proved a deadly delusion. The Soviets then launched Operation Koltso, Ring, in January 1943, a systematic reduction of the pocket. Their artillery pounded the remaining German positions, and infantry launched relentless assaults. German airfields within the Kessel, such as Pitomnik and Gumrak, fell one by one, further isolating the trapped forces. On January 30, 1943, as the Soviets closed in, Hitler promoted Paulus to General Feldmarschall, a symbolic gesture intended to remind him that no German field marshal had ever surrendered. The implication was clear: fight to the last man. However, the reality on the ground was unbearable. On January 31, 1943, the southern pocket of the German forces, including Field Marshal Paulus and his staff, surrendered. The remaining northern pocket continued to resist for 2 more days, finally capitulating on February 2, 1943. The Battle of Stalingrad concluded with a staggering human cost. Estimates suggest over 2 million casualties on both sides, including dead, wounded, and captured, making it one of the bloodiest battles in human history. The German 6th Army was annihilated, with around 91,000 survivors taken prisoner, only about 5,000 of whom would ever return home years later. For Germany, Stalingrad represented an irreparable strategic and psychological blow. The destruction of an entire field army, along with vast quantities of irreplaceable equipment, severely weakened the Wehrmacht and shattered the myth of German invincibility. It marked the end of Germany's offensive capabilities on the Eastern Front. For the Soviet Union, Stalingrad was a colossal victory, a testament to the Red Army's unwavering resolve and tactical ingenuity. It significantly boosted Soviet morale, both military and civilian, and demonstrated to the world that the tide of the war had decisively turned against Nazi Germany. Geopolitically, the victory at Stalingrad solidified the Soviet Union's position as a major Allied power. It dispelled any lingering doubts among the Western allies about the USSR's ability to resist and ultimately defeat the Axis on its own terms, fundamentally reshaping the global perception of the conflict's inevitable outcome. Stalingrad stands as a searing monument to human suffering and endurance in the crucible of total war. It embodies the horrific costs of ideological fanaticism and the catastrophic consequences of strategic inflexibility when Adolf Hitler refused to allow his forces to retreat, effectively condemning them. More than just a military engagement, Stalingrad became a psychological watershed. It was the moment the German war machine was decisively broken on the Eastern Front, forcing a retreat that would only end with the fall of Berlin. It underscored the brutal reality that war, in its most extreme form, can reduce civilization to primal struggle for survival amidst the ruins. The battle teaches us about the resilience of the human spirit, the devastating impact of urban warfare, and the complex interplay of strategy, logistics, and morale in conflict. It reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a determined defense can ultimately turn the tide of history. To continue exploring the pivotal moments that shaped our world and understanding the profound impact of history, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and become part of a community dedicated to these vital lessons. Your support helps us bring these stories to light. What part of the Battle of Stalingrad, its sheer scale of suffering, or its ultimate significance resonates with you the most? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below.